What's funny to me about video game cover artwork is that its function has really changed over the years. Back in the day, before the internet came around, it was one of the most important factors that helped us decide which game to buy. Nowadays, we pretty much know everything there is to know about a game before we buy it, and the artwork instead serves more of a collectible, will this look good displayed type of purpose. Think about it, say you had your heart set on buying Breath of the Wild, as many of us did after hearing about it for years and years. If the cover art completely sucked, while it may make a few of us scratch our heads, and people would probably rage about it on Twitter, everybody who was planning on buying the game to begin with is still going to be buying that game. Back in the day though, that could be a deal breaker, and funny enough, there was a lot more artwork back in the day that were good examples of cover art that was a deal breaker. For example, I can guarantee you that somebody who didn't already know what Mega Man was and saw this in the store could have very easily been misled. What you basically had was the US division trying to come up with artwork that they thought would appeal to American kids for a game that was made and developed in Japan. So yeah, sometimes they were just a little off the mark. Not to mention the artwork for some of these games was much more of an afterthought back then than it is now. What I'm trying to say is companies take it a little more seriously now. That's not to say there wasn't plenty of great cover art back then, just as there is nowadays. And that's why I'm going to share some of my favorite examples of cover art. Of course, I want to know what everybody watching's favorite artwork is as well, so be thinking about what you would choose as I go through my list. The first game on my list is Samba de Amigo for Dreamcast. Much like the game itself, the cover art is very colorful and happy. Oh, and totally crazy too, which I like because I find it to be fun. One thing that bothers me about more modern games is how everything has to be so serious. Of course, I don't mind some games being more serious, but I do miss how more games used to take a less serious tone, with this being one of the best examples and cover art to really exemplify it. And speaking of games with a less serious tone, the next game on my list is Earthworm Jim. Also, this would probably be a good time to point out that the artwork on a game's case isn't always exactly the same as what's on the cartridge. In any case, what I like so much about this artwork is how pissed off Earthworm Jim is made to look, going right in line with the whole 90s attitude thing games like to associate with the Genesis. However, it's completely undermined by the fact that, well, he's a worm in a suit and the gun that he's holding looks like something that would have come from a toy store. Yeah, I like this cover art so much just because it encapsulates the spirit of the early 90s era it comes from. Okay, next game on the list is probably the one with the most serious tone, and that would be Radiant Silvergun. This is actually cover art from the Japanese version of the game because the American copy of this game doesn't exist. Not on Sega Saturn at least. Anyways, this cover art has always stood out to me as something unique and special. There's a bit of mystery to it as well. You wouldn't necessarily know that this game is a shoot 'em up if you didn't already know that beforehand. It just feels like some sort of artistic vision is being presented to me. The ships are very mysterious, the title is emphasized with Treasure Presents right before it, and then there's a matter of the title itself. What the hell is a Radiant Silvergun supposed to be? I don't know, but it sounds pretty cool and seems like it would make a great video game. Which it does, by the way. Okay, back to the more lighthearted stuff with my next game, and it's actually a more modern game, being Ukulele and the Impossible Lair. Not to be confused with the original Ukulele, which isn't as good of a game in my opinion. The reason why I like this cover art so much is because, you guessed it, it's very colorful. As you might have noticed, I'm a guy who is a fan of color. It just makes the game look like it has the type of world that would be fun to be in and play through. Even just take a look at the villain in the upper right corner. While clearly somebody who represents evil in the game, the cover depicts him by using colors that, while more ominous and darker, are still really pretty to look at and match well with the rest of the colors shown. Just makes me think of a watercolor painting or something. The next cover art I want to talk about is good old Pikmin 3. I specifically chose this Pikmin cover because of the look on the Pikmin's faces. It does a great job of showing how even though they're very capable, they're also kind of mindless and lack much agency of their own. And I think that's fair to say given the fact that they'll do everything you tell them to do, including charging headfirst into harm's way, even if it's a bad decision on your end. I mean, just look at the yellow one, it doesn't even have a mouth or a nose. How does it eat? Through its butt? The blue one doesn't have a nose but has a mouth, and same thing with the red one but vice versa. And how can we forget about the rock Pikmin, which was a new addition to this game, symbolized by it not being on the tree branch with the other Pikmin. Alright, next game on the list would be Sonic 2. I think I may definitely have some bias when it comes to this one, but I just love the way the giant 2 is depicted behind Sonic and Tails. Like, there's nothing else besides a blue background in that 2, because all you need to know is that this is the sequel, and it's even better than the first game. Plus, the classic checkerboarding is applied to the 2, which I always thought was a nice touch. If we zoom out to the full artwork that you'd see on the case, you can also see the very ominous looking Dr. Robotnik. I don't know, not sure if anyone else agrees with me, but the whole I'm a sequel and I know it vibes just really made this game's cover always seem so cool to me as a kid. The simple approach is actually kind of similar to why I always liked the cover art for Sonic and Knuckles, which was very mysterious, like, okay, this game has Sonic and some other dude named Knuckles, who is apparently just as important, and that's all you need to know in order to be intrigued. And intrigued I was. As a small disclaimer, Knuckles was already in Sonic 3, but I hadn't played Sonic 3 yet, so the effect might have been different on me than it was for others. Alright, so that does it for the list of games that I've chosen, but like I said before, I'm curious what all of you have to say. More than ever, this is a very subjective thing to try to measure and is totally going to vary from person to person depending on your personal attachment to any of these games. When I was looking through all of my games to pick these out, I thought to myself, you know, I certainly have my favorites, but honestly I like the covers on all my video games, and probably just because they're video games, you know? Okay, so be sure to share one of your favorite cover arts, and I look forward to reading your answers as always. Leave those comments down below, and I will see ya in the next video.